The tribunal please, the next presentation concerning Germanization and spoliation in occupied countries will be presented by Captain Sam Harris. Captain Harris.
May the tribunal please. That noise your honors may hear is my knees knocking. They haven't knocked so hard since I asked my wonderful little wife to marry me. Documents relating to the Nazi program of Germanization and spoliation have been assembled in a document book bearing the letter, where is that letter? U. These document books are now being distributed for the use of the members of the tribunal. I ask your honors to note that the tabs on the side of the document book are numbered 1 to 30. The index sheet at the front of the book keys these numbers to the EC, PS, and R numbers of our exhibits. For your honors' convenience, we have also numbered the pages in each exhibit in pencil at the upper right-hand corner of each exhibit. The documents which we shall introduce were collected by Lieutenant Kenyon, who sits at my right, and by Doctors Nuremberg and Jacobi. Without their untiring efforts, this presentation would not have been possible. Evidence has already been introduced by Mr. Alderman to prove that the defendants conspired to wage aggressive war. It has also been proved that the desire for Lebensraum was one of the chief forces motivating the conspirators to plan, launch, and wage their wars of aggression. We propose at this time to present evidence disclosing what the conspirators intended to do with conquered territories, called by them Lebensraum, after they had succeeded in overpowering the victims of their aggressions. We have broadly divided this subject into two categories: Germanization and spoliation. When we speak of plans to Germanize, we mean plans to assimilate conquered territories politically, culturally, socially, and economically into the German Reich. Germanization, we shall demonstrate, meant the obliteration of the former national character of the conquered territories and the extermination of all elements which could not be reconciled with the Nazi ideology. By spoliation, we mean the plunder of public and private property, and in general, the exploitation of the people and the natural resources of occupied countries. We propose, with the permission of your honors, to introduce in all 30 documents. These documents lay bare some of the secret plans of the conspirators to Germanize, to plunder, to despoil, and to destroy. They do not, of course, tell the whole story of all the conspirators' plans in this field. In some instances, proof of the plan is derived from the acts committed by the conspirators. But these few documents are particularly illuminating with respect to the conspirators' plans for Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Russia, and they indicate the outlines of carefully conceived plans for the rest of Europe. Others who follow will fill in this outline by showing a series of outrages committed on so vast a scale that no doubts will exist that they were committed according to plan. Poland was, in a sense, the testing ground for the conspirators' theories upon Lebensraum, and I turn to that country first. The 4 western provinces of Poland were purportedly incorporated into Germany by an order of 8 October 1939. This order, which was signed by Hitler, Lammers, and defendants Goering, Frick, and Hess, is set forth in Reichsgesetzblatt, 1939, Part 1, page 2042, and we ask the tribunal to take judicial notice thereof. These areas of Poland are frequently referred to in correspondence between the conspirators as incorporated eastern territories. The remainder of Poland, which was seized by the Nazi invaders, was established as the government general of Poland by an order of Hitler dated 12 October 1939. By that same order, defendant Hans Frank was named Governor General of the newly created Government General, and defendant Seyss-Inquart was named Deputy Governor General. This order is set forth in Reichsgesetzblatt, 1939, Part 1, page 2077, and we ask the tribunal also to take judicial notice of it. The plans with respect to Poland were rather complicated, and I believe that the significance of specific items of proof may be more readily apparent if, in advance of the introduction of the documents, I am permitted briefly to indicate the broad pattern of these plans. We submit that the documents we are about to introduce on Poland show the following. First, the conspirators specifically planned to exploit the people and material resources of the Government General of Poland in order to strengthen the Nazi war machine, to impoverish the Government General, and to reduce it to a vassal state. At a later stage, plans were formulated for creating islands of German settlements in the more fertile regions of the Government General in order to engulf the native Polish population and accelerate the process of Germanization. Second, the incorporated area of Poland, which was deemed a part of the German Reich, was to be ruthlessly Germanized. To that end, the conspirators planned, A, to permit the retention of the productive facilities in the incorporated area, all of which, of course, would be dedicated to the Nazi war machine. B, they planned to deport to the Government General many hundreds of thousands of Jews, members of the Polish intelligentsia, and other non-compliant elements. We shall show that the Jews who were deported to the Government General were doomed to speedy annihilation. Moreover, since the conspirators felt that members of the Polish intelligentsia could not be Germanized of resistance against their new order, they too were to be eliminated. C, they planned to deport all able-bodied Polish workers to Germany for work in the Nazi war machine. This served the twofold purpose of helping to satisfy the labor requirements of the Nazi war machine and preventing the propagation of a new generation of Poles. Mr. Dodd has already produced abundant proof on this topic, and I shall do no more than refer to it. D, they plan to mold all persons in the incorporated area who were deemed to possess German blood into German subjects who would religiously adhere to the principles of National Socialism. To that end, the conspirators set up an elaborate racial register. Those who resisted or refused to cooperate in this program were sent to concentration camps. E, they planned to bring thousands of German subjects into the incorporated area for purposes of settlement. F, and finally, they planned to confiscate the property, particularly the farms, of the Poles, the Jews, and all dissident elements. The confiscation of the property of Jews was part of the conspirators' larger program of extermination. Confiscation likewise served three additional purposes. One, it provided land for the new German settlers and enabled the conspirators to reward their adherents. Two, dispossessed Polish property owners could be shipped to Germany for work in the production of implements of war. And three, the separation of Polish farmers from their wives furthered the plans to prevent the growth of a new generation of Poles. We turn now to the specific items of proof. I first offer in evidence document number EC 344-16, which is USA Exhibit number 297. This document is a report of an interview with defendant Frank on 3 October 1939 and was found among the files of the OKW, which were assembled in bulk at the Feckenheim Document Center. This particular document was included in a large report prepared in the OKW by one Captain Varin at the direction of General Thomas, then chief of the military economic staff of the OKW. I quote from the first 19 lines of page 3 of the English text. The German text appears at page 29, lines 25 to 36, and page 30, lines 1 to 6. The report states, and I quote, in the first interview which the chief of the Central Division and the liaison officer between the Armament Department Upper East and the chief administrative officer, subsequently called Governor General, had with Minister Frank on October 3, 1939, in Posen, Frank explained the directive and the economic and political responsibilities which had been conferred upon him by the Fuhrer, and according to which he intended to administer Poland. According to these directives, Poland can only be administered by utilizing the country through means of ruthless exploitation, deportation of all supplies, raw materials, machines, factory installations, etc., which are important for the German war economy. Availability of all workers for work within Germany, reduction of the entire Polish economy to the absolute minimum necessary for the bare existence of the population, closing of all educational institutions, especially technical schools and colleges, in order to prevent the growth of the new Polish intelligentsia. Poland, Defendant Frank stated, and this is an exact quotation, Poland shall be treated as a colony. The Poles shall be the slaves of the greater German world empire. I should like also to quote from the last 6 lines of the English text of this exhibit. In the German text, it is lines 18 to 23 of page 30. Defendant Frank further stated, and I quote, "By destroying Polish industry, its subsequent reconstruction after the war would become more difficult, if not impossible, so that Poland would be reduced to its proper position as an agrarian country which would have to depend upon Germany for importation of industrial products." Close quote. As further proof of the defendant's plan to plunder and despoil the government general of Poland, I next offer in evidence document number EC 410. EC 410, which is U.S. exhibit number 298. In addition to the proof of the defendant's plans to plunder and despoil the government general, this document demonstrates the difference in treatment which the conspirators planned for the incorporated area of Poland and the government general. It is a copy of a directive issued and signed by Defendant Goering on 19 October 1939 and was likewise found among the captured OKW files. I quote from lines 1 to 19 on page 1 of the English text. Page 1, lines 1 to 19. In the German text, it is all of page 1 and the first line of page 2. Defendant Goering's directive states, and I quote, "In the meeting of October 13th, I have given detailed instructions for the economical administration of the occupied territories. I will repeat them here in short. 1. The task for the economic treatment of the various administrative regions is different depending on whether a country is involved which will be incorporated politically into the German Reich, or whether we deal with a government general which in all probability will not be made a part of Germany. In the first mentioned territories, the reconstruction and expansion of the economy, the safeguarding of all their production facilities and supplies must be aimed at, as well as a complete incorporation into the greater German economic system at the earliest possible time. On the other hand, there must be removed from the territories of the government general all raw materials, scrap materials, machines, etc., which are of use for the German war economy. Enterprises which are not absolutely necessary for the meager maintenance of the naked existence of the population must be transferred to Germany, unless such transfer would require an unreasonably long period of time and would make it more practical to exploit those enterprises by giving them German orders to be executed at their present location. Close quotation. Once the government general had been stripped of its industrial potential, the defendants planned to leave the country desolate. Not even the war damage was to be repaired. This is the clear import of the documents previously introduced and is likewise made clear by document number EC 411, which is USA Exhibit number 299. I offer this document in evidence. This document is a copy of an order dated 20 November 1939 by Defendant Hess in his capacity as Deputy Fuhrer. This document was also found in the captured OKW files. I quote the English and German texts in their entirety. Defendant Hess stated, and I quote, "I hear from party members who came from the government general that various agencies, as for instance the military economic staff, the Reich Ministry for Labor, etc., intend to reconstruct certain industrial enterprises in Warsaw. However, in accordance with a decision by Minister Dr. Frank, approved by the Fuhrer, Warsaw shall not be rebuilt, nor is it the intention of the Fuhrer to rebuild or reconstruct any industry in the government general." Close quote. Turning from the defendants' program of economic spoliation in the government general to their program of deportation and resettlement, I next offer in evidence document number 661 PS. 661 PS. Which is USA Exhibit number 300. This is a secret report prepared by the Academy of German Law in January 1940 upon plans for the mass migration of Poles and Jews from incorporated areas of Poland to the government general, and for the forcible deportation of able-bodied Poles to Germany. This document was obtained from the Ministerial Collecting Center at Kassel, Germany. The date does not appear in the English translation, but it is clearly set forth on the cover page of the original document as January 1940. Before quoting from this document, I ask first that the tribunal take judicial notice of the decree of 11 July 1934, embodied in the Reichsgesetzblatt, Part 1, page 605, 11 July 1934, which provided that the Academy of German Law would be a public corporation of the Reich under the supervision of the Reich Ministers of Justice and the Interior, and that its task would be, quote, to promote the reconstruction of German legal life and to realize, in constant close collaboration with the competent legislative organizations, the National Socialist program in the entire sphere of the law, close quote. Second, before quoting from the aforementioned report of the Academy of Law, I should like to offer in evidence document number 2749 PS. 2749 PS, which is USA Exhibit number 301. This is the title page of the publication of the Academy of German Law for 1940. It is offered for the purpose of showing that Defendant Frank was the president of the Academy of German Law during the period that the above-mentioned secret report of the Academy was made. The document specifically states, and I quote, Reich Minister Dr. Hans Frank, President of the Academy for German Law, 7th year, 1940, close quote. Now, if I may ask your honors to return to document number 661 PS. I should first like to quote page 1, lines 6 to 24 of the English text. In the German text, these extracts appear at page 6, lines 6 to 10, and line 22, page 6, to line 4, page 7. I quote, For the carrying out of costly and long-term measures for the increase of agricultural production, the government general can at the most absorb 1 to 1.5 million resettlers, as it is already overpopulated. By further absorption of 1.6 million resettlers, the 1925 Reich census figure of 133 inhabitants per square kilometer would be reached, which practically, because of already existing rural overpopulation and lack of industry, would result in a double overpopulation. This figure of 1.6 million will barely suffice to transfer from the Reich the Jews from the liberated area, from the liberated East, parenthesis, over 600,000, close parenthesis. Parts of the remaining Jews, preferably the younger age groups for Germany proper, Austria, Sudetengau, and the Protectorate, altogether over 1 million. Continuing the quotation, the report goes on with respect to transfers from the Reich, and I continue to quote, the Polish intelligentsia, who have been politically active in the past and potential political leaders, the leading economic personalities, comprising owners of large estates, industrialists and businessmen, etc., the peasant population, so far as it has to be removed in order to carry out by strips of German settlements the encirclement of Polish territories in the East. Close quote. Next, I quote the last paragraph on page 1 of the English text. The German text is at page 8, lines 3 to 10. Quote, in order to relieve the living space of the Poles in the government general, as well as in the liberated East, one should remove cheap labor temporarily by the hundreds of thousands, employ them for a few years in the old Reich, and thereby hamper their native biological propagation. Their assimilation into the old Reich must be prevented. Close quote. Finally, I quote from the last paragraph of page 2 of the English text. In the German text, it is the last 5 lines of page 40. I quote, strictest care is to be taken that secret circulars, memoranda, and official correspondence which contain instructions detrimental to the Poles are kept steadily under lock and key so that they will not someday fill the white books printed in Paris or the USA. your honors will recall from your own experiences the vicious propaganda campaigns conducted by Nazi Germany to discredit the Polish books when they made their appearances in countries friendly to Poland. The last paragraph of this document from which I have just read gives the lie to that whole Nazi propaganda campaign. The plans for the deportation of thousands of innocent people, which are set forth in the document from which I have just quoted, were not mere theories spun by lawyers. They represented, as the next three documents to be offered in evidence will show, a program which was in fact ruthlessly executed. I next offer in evidence document number 2233PS-G, Frank Diaries, 1939, from page 20, from 25 October to 15 December, which is USA Exhibit number 302. This document was obtained from the 7th Army Document Center at Heidelberg. I quote from the last paragraph of page 1, carrying over to the first two lines of page 2 of the English text. In the German text, the statements appear at page 19, lines 19 to 28. Page 19, lines 19 to 28. Defendant Frank stated, and I quote, "The Reichsfuhrer SS, meaning Himmler, wishes that all Jews be evacuated from the newly gained Reich territories. Up to February, approximately 1 million people are to be brought in this way into the government general. The families of good racial extraction present in the occupied Polish territory, approximately 4 million people, should be transferred into the Reich and individually housed and thereby be uprooted as a people." Close quote. I next offer in evidence document number EC 305. This is USA Exhibit number 303.
No, wait a minute.
That's 305.
What's the number?
EC 305.
EC 305.
Right, sir. This exhibit is the top secret minutes of a meeting held on 12 February 1940 under the chairmanship of Defendant Goering on, quote, "questions concerning the East," close quote. The document was found in the captured OKW files. Himmler and Defendant Frank likewise were present at this meeting. I initially quote from page 1, lines 15 to 17 of the English text. These extracts are found in the front page, lines 1 to 8 of the German text. The minutes state, and I quote, "By way of introduction, the General Field Marshal," meaning Defendant Goering, "explained that the strengthening of the war potential of the Reich must be the chief aim of all measures to be taken in the East," unquote. I next quote the first two lines of the last paragraph on page 1 of the English text. The German text appears at page 2, lines 2 to 4. Quote, "Agriculture. The task consists of obtaining the greatest possible agricultural production from the new eastern gauze, disregarding," questions of ownership, close quote. Our next quote from the first sentence of the second paragraph of page 2 of the English text. This is at page 3, lines 22 to 24 of the German text. Quote, special questions concerning the government general. The general government will have to receive the Jews who are ordered to emigrate from Germany and the new Eastern Gauls, close quote. Finally, I quote paragraph number 2 under Roman numeral 2 of page 2 of the English text. These statements appear in the German text at page 4, lines 3 to 19. Quote, the following reported on the situation in the Eastern Territories. 2. Reichsstatthalter Gauleiter Forster, who said, continuing the quotation, the population of the Danzig, West Prussia Gau, newly acquired territories is 1.5 million, of whom 240,000 are Germans, 850,000 well-established Poles, and 300,000 immigrant Poles, Jews, and asocials, 1,800 Jews. 87,000 persons have been evacuated, 40,000 of these from Gotenhofen. From there, also the numerous shirkers, who are now looked after by welfare, will have to be deported to the government general. Therefore, an evacuation of 20,000 further persons can be counted on for the current year, close quote. Comparable reports were made by other Gauleiters at the meeting. The figures that are quoted, it may be noted, were only as of February 1940. The forcible deportations which are reported in the exhibits from which I have just read did not involve merely ordering the unfortunate victims to leave their homes and to take up new residences elsewhere. These deportations were accomplished according to plan in an utterly brutal and inhuman manner. Document number 1918 PS, 1918 PS, which is Exhibit USA Exhibit number 304, affords striking proof of this fact, and I offer it in evidence. This is a speech delivered by Himmler to officers of the SS on a day commemorating the presentation of the Nazi flag. It is contained in a compilation of speeches delivered by Himmler and was captured by the counterintelligence branch of the United States Army. The exact date of the speech does not appear in the exhibit, but its contents plainly show that it was delivered sometime after Poland had been overrun. I quote from the 2nd to the 8th lines of page 1 of the English text. In the German text, this quotation appears at page 52, lines 2 to 10. In this speech, Himmler said, and I quote, very frequently the member of the Waffen-SS thinks about the deportation of this people here. These thoughts came to me today when watching the very difficult work out there performed by the security police, supported by your men, who helped them a great deal. Exactly the same thing happened in Poland in weather 40 degrees below zero, where we had to haul away thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, where we had to have the toughness, you should hear this but also forget it again, to shoot thousands of leading Poles. I repeat the latter statement, where we had to have the toughness to shoot thousands of leading Poles, close quote. Such Poles from the incorporated area as managed to survive the journey to the government general could look forward at best to extreme hardship and exposure to every form of degradation and brutality. Your honors will recall Defendant Frank's statement contained in document number EC 344-16, now USA Exhibit number 297, which was introduced a short while ago, that the Polish economy would be reduced to the absolute minimum necessary for the bare existence of the population. Your honors will also recall Defendant Goering's directive in document number EC 410, now USA Exhibit 298, also introduced a few minutes ago, that all industrial enterprises in the government general not absolutely necessary for the maintenance of the naked existence of the Polish population must be removed to Germany. A bare, a naked existence by the precepts of the conspirators meant virtual starvation. For the Jews who were forcibly deported to the government general, there was, of course, absolutely no hope. They were, in effect, deported to their graves. The defendant Frank, by his own admissions, had dedicated himself to their complete annihilation. I refer your honors to the Frank Diaries, Conference Volume 1941, October to December, which is document number 2233 PS-D, and was introduced by Major Walsh earlier as USA Exhibit number 281. The particular statement that I want to quote appears at page 4, your honors, of document number 2233 PS. And I believe it appears at page 77, lines 9 and 10 of the German text. I quote, this is what Defendant Frank stated: "We must annihilate the Jews wherever we find them and wherever it is possible." I turn next to that aspect of the conspirators' program which involved the forcible Germanization of persons in the incorporated area who were deemed to possess German blood. I'm referring now, your honors, to the incorporated area and persons who were deemed to possess German blood. Such persons, the evidence will show, were given the choice of the concentration camp or submission to Germanization. Himmler was the chief executioner of this program, and initially I should like to introduce a few documents which disclose the powers bestowed upon him and his conception of his task. First, I offer in evidence document number 686 PS. 686 PS. This is USA Exhibit 305. This is a copy of a secret decree signed by Hitler and defendants Goering and Keitel, dated 7 October 1939, entrusting Himmler with the task of executing the conspirators' Germanization program. This particular document came from the Ministerial Collection Center at Kassel, Germany. I quote from page 1, lines 9 to 21 of the English text. In the German text, these extracts appear at page 1, lines 13 to 25. Page 1, lines 13 to 25. I quote, "The Reichsfuhrer SS, who is Himmler, has the obligation in accordance with my directives, 1, to bring back for final return into the Reich all German nationals and racial Germans in the foreign countries. 2, to eliminate the harmful influence of such alien parts of the population which represent a danger to the Reich and the German folk community. 3, the forming of new German settlements by resettling, and in particular by settling the returning German citizens and racial Germans from abroad. The Reichsfuhrer SS is authorized to take all necessary general and administrative measures for the execution of his obligation. Close quote. Himmler's conception of his task under this decree are plainly stated in the foreword which he wrote for the Deutsche Arbeit issue of July 1942. The foreword is contained in document number 2915 PS. 2915 PS. Now U.S. Exhibit number 306. That's 2915 PS, Your Honor. I quote from the first 4 lines of the English text. The German text appears at page 157. Quote, "It is not our task," Himmler wrote, "to Germanize the East in the old sense, that is, to teach the people there the German language and German law, but to see to it that only people of purely German, Germanic blood live in the East." Signed, Himmler. I next offer in evidence document number 2916 PS. 2916 PS, which is USA Exhibit number 307. This document contains various materials taken out of the Der Menscheneinsatz of 1940, a confidential publication issued by Himmler's office for the consolidation of German nationhood. I quote initially from page 1, lines 7 to 11. In the German text, these extracts appear at page 51, first 4 lines under the letter D. I quote, "The removal of foreign races from the incorporated Eastern territories is one of the most essential goals to be accomplished in the German East. This is the chief national political task which has to be executed in the incorporated Eastern territories by the Reichsfuhrer SS, Reichskommissar, Commissioner for the strengthening of the national character of the German people." Close quote. I next quote from lines 33 to 39 of page 1 of the English text. In the German text, these extracts appear on page 52, lines 14 to 20. I quote, "There are the following 2 primary reasons which make the regaining of lost German blood an urgent necessity. 1, prevention of a further increase of the Polish intelligentsia through families of German descent, even if they are Polonized. 2, increase of the population by racial elements desirable for the German nation, and the acquisition of ethno-biologically unobjectionable forces for the German reconstruction of agriculture and industry." Close quote. Further light is thrown upon the goals which the conspirators had set for their Germanization program in conquered eastern areas by a speech delivered by Himmler on 14 October 1943. This speech was published by the National Socialist Leadership Staff of the OKW. The document came to us through the document section, 3rd U.S. Infantry Division. Excerpts from this speech are set forth in L70, which is USA Exhibit 308. I quote all of the English text. In the German text, these excerpts appear at page 23, lines 6 to 11, 12 to 15, 20 to 23, and on page 30, lines 7 to 16. Himmler said, and I quote, "I consider that in dealing with members of a foreign country, especially some Slav nationality, we must not start from German points of view, and we must not endow these people with decent German thoughts and logical conclusions of which they are not capable, but we must take them as they really are. Obviously, in such a mixture of peoples, there will always be some racially good types. Therefore, I think that it is our duty to take their children with us, to remove them from their environment, if necessary, by robbing or stealing them. Either we win over any good blood that we can use for ourselves and give it a place in our people, or we destroy that blood." Continuing the German text at page 30, lines 7 to 16, which is a continuation of the English text, I believe, Your Honors. Himmler stated, and I quote, "For us, the end of this war will mean an open road to the East, the creation of the Germanic Reich in this way or that, the fetching home of 30 million human beings of our blood, so that still during our lifetime we shall be a people of 120 million Germanic souls. That means that we shall be the sole decisive power in Europe. That means that we shall then be able to tackle the peace, during which we shall be willing for the first 20 years to rebuild and spread out our villages and towns, and that we shall push the borders of our German race 500 kilometers further out to the east." Close quote. In furtherance of the unlawful plans disclosed by the last 4 exhibits which have been offered in evidence, the conspirators contrived a racial register in the incorporated area of Poland. The racial register was, in effect, an elaborate classification of persons deemed to be of German blood and contained provisions setting forth some of the rights, privileges, and duties of the persons in each classification. Persons were classified into 4 groups. 1, Germans who had actively promoted the Nazi cause. 2, Germans who had been more or less passive in the Nazi struggle, but had retained their German nationality. 3, persons of German extraction who, although previously connected with the Polish nation, were willing to submit to Germanization. 4, persons of German descent who had been, quote, politically absorbed by the Polish nation, close quote, and who would be resistant to Germanization. The racial register was inaugurated under a decree of 12 September 1940, issued by Himmler as Reich Commissioner for the Consolidation of German Nationhood. And this is contained in document number 2916, previously introduced in evidence. That's USA Exhibit number 307, 2916 PS. I quote from page 4 of the English text, lines 14 to 46. In the German text, these extracts appear at page 92, lines 29 to the end of the page, and lines 1 to 9 of page 93. I quote, "The list of ethnic Germans will be divided into 4 parts, limited to inter-office use. 1. Ethnic Germans who fought actively in the ethnic struggle. Besides the membership of a German organization, every other activity in favor of the German against a foreign nationality will be considered an active manifestation. 2. Ethnic Germans who did not actively intervene in favor of the German nationality, but who preserved their traceable German nationality. 3. Persons of German descent who became connected with the Polish nation in the course of years, but have, on account of their attitude, the prerequisites to become full-fledged members of the German national community. To this group belong all persons of non-German descent who live in a people's mixed marriage with an ethnic German in which the influence of the German spouse has prevailed. Persons of Masurian, Slonzak, or Upper Silesian descent who are to be recognized as ethnic Germans usually belong to this group 3. 4. Persons of German descent politically absorbed by the Polish nation, renegades. Persons not included on the list of ethnic Germans are Poles or foreign nationals. Their treatment is regulated by B2. Members of groups 1 and 2, are ethnic Germans who will be used for the reconstruction in the East. The differentiation between the groups 1 and 2 is important for the National Socialist Party. Primarily, only members of Group 1 should be accepted in the party, according to the instruction of the Deputy of the Fuhrer. Members of Group 3 and 4 have to be educated as full Germans. That is, have to be re-Germanized in the course of time through an intensive educational training in old Germany. The establishment of members of Group 4 has to be based on the doctrine that German blood must not be utilized in the interest of a foreign nation. Against those who refuse re-Germanization, security police measures are to be taken." Close quote. The basic idea of creating a racial register for persons of German extraction was later carried over in a decree of 3 March 1941, signed by Himmler and defendants Frick and Hess. This decree is dated 4 March 1941 and is set forth in the Reichsgesetzblatt 1941, Part 1, page 118. We ask the tribunal to take judicial notice thereof. The entire apparatus of the SS was thrown behind the vigorous execution of these decrees. Proof of this fact is contained in document number R112-PS, R112-PS, which is USA Exhibit number 309. And I now offer it in evidence. This exhibit contains directives issued by Himmler as the Reich Commissioner for the Consolidation of German Nationhood. I quote first from the last 2 paragraphs of the English text of the directive of 16 February 1942, which is the page which is numbered 3 of this exhibit. In the German text, these provisions appear at page 1 of the first decree, dated 16 February 1942, paragraphs 1 and 2. The directive provided, and I now quote, 1. Where racial Germans have not applied for entry in the German ethnical list, you will instruct the subordinate agencies to turn over their names to the State Police Superior Office. Subsequently, you will report to me. 2. The local State Police Superior Office will charge the persons whose names are turned over to them to prove within 8 days that they have applied for entry in the German ethnical list. If such proof is not submitted, the person in question is to be taken into protective custody for transfer into a concentration camp. Close quote. The measures taken against persons in the fourth category, Polonized Germans, as the conspirators called them, were particularly harsh. These persons, as indicated previously, were resistant to Germanization, and ruthless measures calculated to break their resistance were prescribed. Where the individual's past history indicated that he could not be effectively Germanized, he was thrown into a concentration camp. Some of these measures are set forth in subparagraph A of paragraph 2 of page 5 of document number R112PS. R112PS, page 5. And I quote in full from the English text of that particular paragraph. This passage is set forth in the German text at pages 2 to 3 of the second decree dated 16 February 1942 under Roman numeral 2. It's a German text, pages 2 to 3 of the second decree dated 16 February 1942 under Roman numeral 2. Quote, this is what the directives provided. 2. The re-Germanization of the Polonized Germans presupposes their complete separation from Polish surroundings. For that reason, the persons entered in Division 4 of the German ethnical list are to be dealt with in the following manner. A. They are to be resettled in Old Reich territory. 1 under A. The superior SS and police leaders are charged with evacuating and resettling them according to instructions which will follow later. 2. As social persons and others who are of inferior hereditary quality will not be included in the resettlement. Their names will be turned over at once by the higher SS and police Führer, inspectors of security police and security service, to the competent state police superior office. The latter will arrange for their transfer into a concentration camp. 3. Persons with a particularly bad political record will not be included in the resettlement action. Their names will also be given by the higher SS and police Führer, inspectors of security police and security service, to the competent state police superior office for transfer into a concentration camp. The wives and children of such persons are to be resettled in Old Reich territory and to be included in the Germanization measures. But where the wife also has a particularly bad political record and cannot be included in the resettlement action, her name too is to be turned over to the competent state police office with a view to imprisoning her in a concentration camp. In such cases, the children are to be separated from their parents and to be dealt with according to Roman numeral 3, paragraph 2 of this decree. persons ought to be considered as having a particularly bad political record who have offended the German nation to a very great degree, e.g., who participated in persecution of Germans or boycotts of Germans, etc. Close quote. Coincident with the program of Germanizing persons of German extraction in the incorporated areas, the conspirators, as previously indicated, undertook to settle large numbers of Germans of proven Nazi convictions in that area. This aspect of their program is clearly shown by an article by SS Obergruppenführer and General of the Police Wilhelm Kappe, who was one of Himmler's trusted agents. Excerpts from this article are contained in document number 2915 PS, 2915 PS, which was earlier introduced as U.S. Exhibit number 306. I quote from the second paragraph of the English text of this exhibit. The German text appears at the third line from the bottom of page 170, going over to the first full paragraph of page 171. I now quote Kappe's statement. The victory of the German weapons in the East must therefore be followed by the victory of the German race over the Polish race, if the regained Eastern sphere, according to the Führer's will, henceforth shall for all time remain an essential constituent part of the Greater German Reich. It is therefore of decisive importance to penetrate the regained German region with German farmers, laborers, civil servants, merchants, and artisans, so that a living and deep-rooted bastion of German people can be formed as a protective wall against foreign infiltration and possibly as a starting point for the racial penetration of the territories further east. Close quote.
We'll adjourn now.
Thank you, sir.
10 minutes.
Up to this point, we have been speaking of the Germanization measures in the incorporated area. I should now like briefly to turn to the Germanization program in the government general. In the government general, there were relatively few persons at the outset who qualified as Germans by the conspirator standards. Hence, little would be served by the introduction of a racial register, categorizing persons of German extraction on the model of the one instituted in the incorporated area. And to our knowledge, no such racial register was prescribed in the government general. Rather, the plan seems to have been A, to make the government general a colony of Germany, which, as your honors will recall from document number EC 344-16, which has been introduced as USA Exhibit number 297, was an objective expressed by Defendant Frank, and B, to create so-called, quote, German island settlements, close quote, in the productive farming areas. These island settlements were to be created by an influx of German persons who faithfully adhere to the principles of National Socialism. In this connection, I offer in evidence document number 910 PS. 910 PS. This is USA Exhibit number 310. These are secret notes bearing the date line, Department of the Interior, Krakow, 30 March 1942, and they concern Himmler's statements upon the, quote, planned Germanization, close quote, of the Government General. This document was obtained from the 3rd Army Intelligence Center at Freising, Germany. I now quote from page 2 of the English text, from line 3 to the end of the report. This appears in the German text at page 2, line 21, to the end of the report. The document states, and I quote, "The Reichsfuhrer SS, Himmler, developed further trains of ideas to the effect that in the first 5-year plan for resettlement after the war, the new German Eastern territories should first be filled. Afterwards, it is intended to provide at this time the Crimea and the Baltic countries with a German upper class at least. Into the Government General, perhaps further island settlements should be newly transplanted from European nations. An exact decision in this respect, however, has not been issued. In any case, it is wished that at first a heavy colonization along the Saône and the Brig be achieved so that the parts of Poland are encircled with alien populations. Hitherto, it has always been proved that this kind of encirclement leads most quickly to the desired nationalization." Close quote. In this same connection, I offer in evidence document number 2233PS-H. This is Defendant Frank's Diary, 1941, Volume 2, page 317. This is U.S. Exhibit number 311. I quote from the last sentence at the bottom of our page 3 of the English text of this exhibit. In the German text, this passage appears at page 317, lines 25 to 28. English text is at the bottom of page 3, the last sentence. Defendant Frank stated in this diary, and I quote, "Thanks to the heroic courage of our soldiers, this territory has become German, and the time will come when the valley of the Vistula, from its source to its mouth at the sea, will be as German as the valley of the Rhine." Close quote. I now turn to another phase of the program that I mentioned earlier, that is the conspirators' plans to confiscate the property of Poles, Jews, and dissident elements. As I previously mentioned, the evidence will show that these plans were designed to accomplish a number of objectives. Insofar as the Jews were concerned, they were part and parcel of the conspirators' overall program of extermination. Confiscation was also a means of providing property for German settlers and of rewarding those who had rendered faithful service to the Nazi state. This phase of their program likewise made available dispossessed Polish farmers for slave labor in Germany and operated to further the conspirators' objective of preventing the growth of another generation of Poles. Proof of the fact that the conspirators confiscated the property of Poles in furtherance of their Germanization and slave labor programs is contained in document number 1352 PS. 1352 PS, previously introduced by Mr. Dodd as U.S. Exhibit number 176. This exhibit contains a number of reports by one Kusha, who appears to have been one of Himmler's chief deputies in Poland. Mr. Dodd quoted from one of Kusha's confidential reports, dated 22 May 1940, at our page 4, paragraph 5 of the English text. In the German text, it is at page 9, lines 16 to 18. In this statement, Kuscher pointed out that it was possible, without difficulty, to confiscate small farms, and that, and I now quote, the former owners of Polish farms, together with their families, will be transferred to the Old Reich by the employment agencies for employment as farm workers. Close quote. That, Your Honors, was at 1352 PS, page 4, paragraph 5 of the English text. I now desire to quote from another report by Kuscher contained in the same exhibit and bearing the same date, 22 May 1940. I think, sir, the upper right-hand corner, numbers, if you followed, might simplify it. The report from which I now quote is marked secret and is entitled, quote, Details of the Confiscation of the Belitz Country, unquote. Initially, I should like to quote from the last paragraph at the bottom of page 1 of this exhibit being, you'll recall, 1352 PS. 1352 PS, last paragraph at the bottom of page 1. The German text is at page 11, paragraphs 1 and 2. Kuscher stated, and I quote, some days ago, the commandant of the concentration camp being built at Auschwitz spoke at staff leader Muller's and requested support for the carrying out of his assignments. He said that it was absolutely necessary to confiscate the agricultural enterprises within a certain area around the concentration camp, since not only the fields, but also the farmhouses of these bordered directly on the concentration camp. A local inspection held on the 21st of this month revealed the following. There is no room for doubt that the agricultural enterprises bordering on the concentration camp must be confiscated at once. Further than this, the camp commandant requests that further plots of farmland be placed at his disposal so that he can keep the prisoners busy. This too can be done without further delay, since enough land can be made available for the purpose. The owners of the plots are all Poles. Close quote. I next quote from page 2, lines 22 to 31 of the English text of this same exhibit. The German text is at page 12, paragraph 2, continuing through to line 22 from the top of the page. I quote, I had the following discussion with the head of the labor office in Belitz. The lack of agricultural laborers still exists in the Old Reich. The transfer of the previous owners of the confiscated enterprises, together with their entire families, to the Reich is possible without any further consideration. It is only necessary for the Labor Office to receive the lists of the persons in time in order to enable it to take the necessary steps, collection of transportation, distribution over the various regions in need of such labor, close quote. Finally, I quote from page 3 of this same exhibit, lines 6 to 13 of the English text. The German text appears at page 13, the last 3 lines continuing through to page 14, line 9. Quote, the confiscation of these Polish enterprises in Olsen will also be carried out within the next few days. The commandant of the concentration camp will furnish SS men and a truck for the execution of the action. Should it not yet be possible to take the Poles from Auschwitz to Auschwitz, and Auschwitz, Your Honors, recall, is where the concentration camp was. Continuing the quote, they should be transferred to the empty castle of Zator. The liberated Polish property is to be given to the needy racial German farmers for their use. Close quote. In order to regularize the program of confiscation, Defendant Goering issued a decree on September 17, 1940. This decree appears in the Reichsgesetzblatt, 1940, Part 1, page 1270, and I ask the tribunal to take judicial notice of it. Under Section 2 of this decree, sequestration of movable and immovable property, stores, and other intangible property interests of Jews and, quote, persons who have fled or are not merely temporarily absent, close quote, was made mandatory. In addition, sequestration was authorized under Section 2, subsection 2, if the property were required, quote, for the public welfare, particularly in the interests of Reich defense or the strengthening of Germanism, close quote. By Section 9 of this decree issued by Defendant Goering, confiscation of sequestrated property was authorized, quote, if the public welfare, particularly the defense of the Reich, or the strengthening of Germanism, so requires, close quote. However, Section 1, subsection 2 of the decree provided that property of German nationals was not subject to sequestration and confiscation, and Section 13 provided that sequestration would be suspended if the owner of the property asserted that he was a German. The decree on its face indicates very clearly a purpose to strip Poles, Jews, and dissident elements of their property. It was, moreover, avowedly designed to promote Germanism. No, sir, it's not. We ask the court to take judicial notice of it. It's in the Reichsgesetzblatt. Apparently some question arose at one point as to whether the decree required that a determination be made in each case involving the property of a Pole, that the property was required, quote, for the public welfare, particularly in the interest of Reich defense or the strengthening of Germanism, close quote. The answer supplied by the conspirators was firm and clear. In any case in which the property of a Pole is involved, the, quote, strengthening of Germanism, close quote, required its seizure. In this connection, I offer in evidence document number R92, which is U.S. Exhibit number 312, R92. This document, which is dated 15 April 1941, bears the letterhead of the Reich leader SS, Commissioner for the Consolidation of German Nationhood, and is entitled, quote, Instruction for Internal Use on the Application of the Law Concerning Property of the Poles of 17 September 1940, close quote. This document was captured by the United States Counterintelligence Branch. I quote from page 2, lines 11 to 14 of the English text. Page 2, lines 11 to 14. In the German text, a statement appears at page 3, paragraph 2, subparagraph 2. I quote, "The conditions permitting seizure according to section 2, subsection 2, are always present if the property belongs to a Pole. For the Polish real estate will be needed without exception for the consolidation of the German nationhood." In the Government General, Defendant Frank promulgated a decree on 24 January 1940 authorizing sequestration, quote, "in connection with the performance of tasks serving the public interest," close quote, and liquidation of, quote, "antisocial or financially unremunerative concerns," close quote. The decree is embodied in the Verordnungsblatt of the General Government, number 6, 27 January 1940, page 23, and we ask the Tribunal to take judicial notice of it. The undefined criteria in this decree obviously empowered Nazi officials in the Government General to engage in wholesale seizure of property. The magnitude of the conspirators' confiscation program in Poland was staggering. I ask your honors to turn to the chart on the 6th page of document number R92. Document number R92, which was introduced a moment ago into evidence as U.S. Exhibit number 312. This chart shows that as of 31 May 1943, the staggering total of 693,252 estates, comprising 6,097,525 hectares, had been seized, and 9,508 estates, comprising 270,446 hectares, had been confiscated by the estate offices Danzig, West Prussia, Posen, Sitzenau, and Silesia. This, it should be noted, represented the seizures and confiscations of only 4 offices. That, your honors, concludes our discussion on Poland, and I now turn to Czechoslovakia. At this point of the proceeding, we shall introduce only one document upon Czechoslovakia. This one document, however, contains a startling revelation of the conspirators' plans to Germanize Bohemia and Moravia. It relates how 3 plans, each characterized by its severity, were discussed, and finally how the Fuhrer decided on Plan C, which involved the assimilation of about half the Czech population by the Germans and the extermination of the other half. Moreover, the plan envisaged a large influx into Czechoslovakia of Germans whose loyalty to the Fuhrer was unquestioned. I offer this document in evidence. It is document number 862 PS, 862 PS, and it is USA Exhibit number 313. This is a top secret report dated 15 October 1940, which was written by General Friedericki, Deputy General of the Wehrmacht in Bohemia and Moravia. On the face of the document, it appears that only 4 copies were made. The document we offer in evidence is the original document, which was found among the captured files of the OKW, which are situated in Feckenheim. This document bears the handwritten letters K and J on the first page at the left side. And I am advised that the handwriting is unquestionably that of defendants Keitel and Jodl. I quote the document in its entirety. Quote, on 9 October of this year, the Office of the Reich Protector held an official conference in which State Secretary SS Lieutenant General K.H. Frank spoke about the following. SS Gruppenführer K.H. Frank, it may be noted, was Secretary of State under Defendant von Neurath, who at the date of this report was a protector of Bohemia and Moravia. Continuing this quotation.
Wait, you're going too fast.
Continuing the quotation.
Who did you say Frank was?
Frank, sir, he's an SS Gruppenführer, and he was Secretary of State under Defendant von Neurath. He is not the defendant, Hans Frank. At the date of this particular report, von Neurath, under whom K.H. Frank served, was the protector of Bohemia and Moravia. Continuing the quotation. Since creation of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, party agencies, industrial circles, as well as agencies of the central authorities of Berlin have had difficulties about the solution of the Czech problem. After ample deliberation, the Reich Protector expressed his view about the various plans in a memorandum. In this way, 3 ways of solution were indicated. A, German infiltration of Moravia and reduction of the Czech nationality to a residual Bohemia. This solution is considered unsatisfactory because the Czech problem, even if in a diminished form, will continue to exist. B, many arguments can be brought up against the most radical solution, namely the deportation of all the Czechs. Therefore, the memorandum comes to the conclusion that it cannot be carried out within a reasonable period of time. C, and I am still quoting from the document, assimilation of the Czechs, i.e., absorption of about half of the Czech nationality by the Germans, insofar as this is of importance by being valuable from a racial or other standpoint. This will take place, among other things, also by increasing the Arbeitseinsatz of the Czechs in the Reich territory, with the exception of the Sudeten German border district. In other words, by dispersing the closed Czech nationality. The other half of the Czech nationality must be deprived of its power, eliminated, and shipped out of the country by all sorts of methods. This applies particularly to the racially Mongoloid part and to the major part of the intellectual class. The latter can scarcely be converted ideologically and would represent a burden by constantly making claims for the leadership over the other Czech classes and thus interfering with a rapid assimilation. Elements which counteract the planned Germanization ought to be handled roughly and should be eliminated. The above development, the quotation continues, naturally presupposes an increased influx of Germans from the Reich territory into the Protectorate. After a discussion, the Fuhrer had chosen solution C, assimilation, as a directive for the solution of the Czech problem and decided that while keeping up the autonomy of the protectorate on the surface, the Germanization will have to be carried out in a centralized way by the office of the Reich Protector for years to come. From the above, no particular conclusions are drawn by the armed forces. This is the direction which has always been represented from here. In this connection, I referred to my memorandum, which was sent to the Chief of the Supreme Command of the Armed Forces, dated 12 July 1939, file number 6/39, top secret, entitled, quote, within quote, the Czech problem, close quote, within quote, entitled the quote, within quote, the Czech problem, close quote, Czech, close quote, attached as annex. The Deputy General of the Armed Forces with the Reich Protector in Bohemia, Moravia, signed Friederike, Infantry Lieutenant General. With the permission of your honors, I should like to comment upon some parts of this memorandum. First, I invite your attention to Solution A. This solution would have called for German infiltration into Moravia and the forcible removal of the Czechs from that area to Bohemia. As your honor knows, Moravia lies between Bohemia and Slovakia. Thus, Solution A would have involved the erection of a German state between Bohemia and Slovakia and would have prevented effective intercommunication between the Czechs and the Slovaks. In this manner, the historic desire of these two groups of peace-loving people for unity and the continued existence of their Czechoslovakian state would have been frustrated. Solution A, it may be noted, was rejected because the surviving Czechs, even though compressed into a, quote, residual Bohemia, close quote, would have remained to plague the conspirators. Solution B, which involved the forcible deportation of all Czechs, was rejected not because its terms were deemed too drastic, but rather because a more speedy resolution of the problem was desired. Solution C, as shown in the exhibit, was regarded as the most desirable and was adopted. This solution provided first for the assimilation of about half of the Czechs. This meant two things. A, enforced Germanization for those who were deemed racially qualified, and B, deportation to slave labor in Germany for others. Quote, increasing the Arbeitseinsatz of the Czechs in the Reich territory, close quote, as stated in the exhibit, plainly meant slave labor in Germany. Solution C further provided for the elimination and deportation, quote, by all sorts of methods, close quote, of the other half of the Czech population, particularly the intellectuals, and those who did not meet the racial standards of the conspirators. Intellectuals everywhere were an anathema to the conspirators, and the Czech intellectuals were no exception. Indeed, the Czech intellectuals, as the conspirators well knew, had a conspicuous record of gallantry, self-sacrifice, and resistance to the Nazi ideology. They were, therefore, to be exterminated. As will be shown in other connections, that section of the top secret report, which stated, quote, elements which counteract the planned Germanization ought to be handled roughly and should be eliminated, close quote, meant that intellectuals and other dissident elements were either to be thrown in concentration camps or immediately exterminated. In short, the provisions of Solution C were simply a practical application of the conspirator's philosophy as expressed in Himmler's speech, parts of which we quoted in L70, already offered in evidence as U.S. Exhibit number 308. Himmler said, and I again quote, "Either we win over any good blood that we can use for ourselves, or we destroy that blood." I now turn briefly to the conspirators' program of spoliation and Germanization in the Western occupied countries. Evidence which will be presented at a later stage of this proceeding will show how the conspirators sought to Germanize the Western occupied countries, how they stripped the conquered countries in the West of food and raw materials, leaving to them scarcely enough to maintain a bare existence, how they compelled local industry and agriculture to satisfy the insatiable wants of the German civilian population and the Wehrmacht, and finally how the spoliation in the Western occupied countries was aided and abetted by excessive occupation charges, compulsory and fraudulent clearing arrangements, and confiscation of gold and foreign exchange. The evidence concerning these matters will be presented in great detail by the prosecutor for the Republic of France, and that evidence is so overwhelming that the inference is inescapable that the conspirators' acts were committed according to plan. However, it will not be until after a while that the evidence concerning the execution of the conspirators' plans in the West will be presented to this tribunal. Accordingly, by way of illustration, and for the purpose of showing in this presentation that the conspirators' plans embrace the occupied Western countries as well as the East, we offer in evidence a single exhibit on this aspect of the case, R114. Which is USA Exhibit number 314. This document was obtained from the United States Counterintelligence Branch. It consists of a memorandum dated 7 August 1942 and a memorandum dated 29 August 1942 from Himmler's personal files. The former memorandum deals with a conference of SS officers and bears the title, quote, "General Directions for the Treatment of Deported Alsatians," close quote. The latter memorandum is marked secret and is entitled, quote, "Shifting of Alsatians into Germany proper," unquote. The memoranda comprising this exhibit show that plans were made and partially executed to remove all elements from Alsace which were hostile to the conspirators and to Germanize the province. I quote from page 1, lines 21 to 31 of the English text, entitled, quote, "General Directions for the Treatment of Deported Alsatians," unquote. These extracts are contained in the German text at page 1, the last 8 lines, and page 2, lines 1 to 5. I now quote. The first expulsion action was carried out in Alsace in the period from July to December 1940. In the course of it, 105,000 persons were either expelled or prevented from returning. They were, in the main, Jews, gypsies, and other foreign racial elements, criminals, asocial and incurably insane persons, and, in addition, Frenchmen and Francophiles. The patois-speaking population was combed out by this series of deportations in the same way as the other Alsatians. Referring to the permission the Fuhrer had given him to cleanse Alsace of all foreign, sick, or unreliable elements, Gauleiter Wagner has recently pointed out the political necessity of new deportations, which ought to be prepared as soon as possible. Close quote. Should like your honors to defer this presentation until Monday. Mr. Justice Jackson would like to make some remarks to the court.
Very well.